Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
Welcome to another episode of Trauma Uncensored. My name is Andres Gamboa, and I am with Brooke Scherer here, our host, and basically the person guiding us through how to heal appropriately from insane trauma. Hopefully this is something that's going to help you. If this is your first episode listening to us for the first time, well, welcome. Thank you for being here. Definitely recommend going and check out the episode called The Crash. That's like the episode 0 or episode 1 where you should definitely start to kind of get the gist of what this is going to be about and how we're going to navigate healing out loud. Here, we're going to be talking about how to grow through experiences that may be traumatic or maybe just difficult in a different way. We hope it relates to everyone in different places and it finds you in a place where you needed it most to hear some of the things that Brooke has to share as far as getting over, getting around, and ultimately conquering some of the trauma that you might have experienced in your life. Is that fair to say, Brooke?
Yeah, I would say getting through versus getting over. I'm not a big get over it type of person. I was having this conversation yesterday actually, and with someone else whose mother has been through extreme trauma. Oof. And someone had mentioned, or he had mentioned, or someone had mentioned to her about getting over it. And I'm like, no, we don't get over our traumas. We don't get over the loss, the grief, the assaults, whatever trauma plagues, the one or more traumas. I mean, I'm a byproduct. Jordan's a byproduct of many traumas, not just, Logan's death. And we don't, that's one of the things that I have a hard time hearing people say, well, you've got to get over it. There's someone in our family that right after Logan passed away said, well, he just needs to get over it, talking about Jordan. And I was like, that doesn't happen. You don't, especially 2 or 3 months after your kid's killed, you don't ever get over this. And, but you learn, if you're willing, I will put that in there, if you are willing and are motivated and really want to find life again after your traumas, you have to be willing to do the work. And by doing the work, you can start to live or learn how to live, walking side by side with it. So, I mean, I live a very full life at this point. I own, 2 businesses, and I'm doing this podcast, and, we get the kids to sports and all of these things. I never rest. I'm on the go. I have community that I have coffee with, and it's not something that I'm like, oh, hey, look, I've got all of this stuff going on in my life. I'm over it. Well, no, I'm not. I'll never be over the loss of my child, that, the hole that does still exist in my heart, but I've learned how to walk alongside it. His birthday's coming up and I can feel it already, but I have the tools to be able to say, okay, your body's feeling it. The body remembers. Let's sit with it and not let it create like all of this anxiety where you're like, oh shit, what's going on? And then you freak out and you're running to therapy every 2 seconds. And, it is a matter of understanding how to regulate your body, how to recognize that you are okay, your feet are on the ground, you're in a safe space, and that you're also feeling the emotions of it, and for me, that could be, multiple times a day, which it doesn't usually happen like that anymore, but it could be that, or it could be once, a big, event, or so, for example, not only would Logan be turning 18, but he'd be graduating high school this year. So it's like a double whammy, class of 2025. So I like my body can feel it, but I'm sitting here talking to you and I'm regulated and I'm not, buried under the covers. So again, just to point out, it's never about getting over. It's about learning how to walk alongside it. So I appreciate you giving me the space to correct in that manner.
Yeah, and I know we kind of touched on this before, but I remember you had a specific philosophy on this, so I wanted you to share that because I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And that's another thing that we're going to probably discuss over and over, just for the pun, on the podcast, is that like it doesn't. It's never over, like you're saying, never. Right? There could be, it's like seasonal. There could be, and the seasons could be 10 minutes long, but there's moments where it'll come back and bite you in the ass, like you said, out of nowhere. I was talking to my wife, actually. So my wife is and this is also important for people listening for the first time. Neither of us are psychologists or therapists or trained. I'm an economics major that does stand-up comedy and podcasting.
And I'm a retired graphic design professor, so
yeah. So this is not a place to. I mean, there are wonderful podcasts out there that exist from the perspective of the specialists and therapists, and you should definitely check those out if they're talking in there. We actually looked at those, but all that to disclaim.
Well, and I've actually been on one.
Yeah,
the Treating Trauma podcast.
Yeah. So I mean, they're great. They're wonderful podcasts. This is more a place where we just talk it through and help, hopefully, make you feel not alone. But that said, I was talking to my wife, who is a therapist. She's a counselor, licensed counselor, and she was telling me she was doing her continuing education for her license and stuff. And she was talking about this example that the lady gave during the course, where this guy had been, I don't remember what his thing. I think he might have been at war or something. He had some form of PTSD from something in his life, like as anybody who's been through anything traumatic would have that. War is one of those things. And his daughter bought him the shampoo and whatever, she started noticing some like intense moments with him where like some of his aggression or something like this. I don't know the full details, but the point was that it was the scent of the shampoo that sent him spiraling.
Yep.
So the point I'm trying to make is like, just because, like you said very eloquently, you can't really get over it. You just have to walk with it, because you never know 18th birthday, graduation, or whoever you are listening, that you're at a stoplight and the song comes on that was that song, or the thing happens where at the carnival where I don't know whatever it is, it can come back and bite you in the ass. And it's not about avoiding those moments. It's about learning how to understand yourself and work on yourself to the point where, despite those moments, you can still function and be alive.
And, that's kind of, I think, where some of the work exists too, because, for a long time, I mean, and it still kind of digs into me when I see it, but when I see people on their phones, anywhere really, even at stoplights, even stopped at stoplights, I'm like, what is so important? I mean, really seriously, let's talk about what could happen if you're that addicted that you can't wait until, you're home or you're at a stop. I mean, I'll pull over if there is something that I just absolutely have to do. I pull over every time. I take care of it, and then I keep moving on. And that's how it should be. But, for a long time, Jordan and I would get ourselves into these altercations with people. I remember there was once where we were driving to grief counseling, actually, and we were at the stoplight about to turn into the complex, and the guy behind us or beside us, I don't remember, had been on his phone, and Jordan screamed at the guy. That man got out of his car and stuck his head in Jordan's window and was screaming at us. I mean, that's dangerous, right? But that was the whole, the body dysregulates, right? The body, those triggers will create this response in your body, and it's almost like you lose control. But the work has been so beneficial for me. So it does, I still kind of get activated when I see these things, but I don't respond in the ways I used to. I'm not honking at people and screaming at people. In fact, there was this high schooler who was behind me yesterday as I was going to pick up Mila from school, and we're in the neighborhood, and I'm watching, I'm watching because I was concerned. I let him go around at one point, because I didn't feel it was safe to be in front of him, but his eyes were completely down, and he would get really close to me. Nice. And, and I'm not going to speed through the neighborhood. I do 25 in the neighborhood. That is the speed limit. There are kids out playing, riding their bikes, doing all the things, walking. I mean, kids walk to and from school, the elementary school that Mila goes to. And before, I mean, it was concerning. I was activated, but in the past, without understanding and learning how to regulate my nervous system from remembering the anger, right, from what happened to Logan and all these people, it's kind of like, why the fuck don't you understand that I lost my kid? You're on your phone. And I lost my child. Why don't you understand that? Well, I mean, until it happens to you, chances are, you're not going to, I'm invincible. It'll never happen to me. Yeah. Trauma won't happen to me. And then it does. And then you're like, oh my God, if only I knew. But I would have pulled over or done something to get him to stop or to hear me say, get off your fucking phone. Because that's what I would do time and time again. And, that's one of those things that, it can be anything from a smell to a noise that will activate your PTSD. I've got many of them, but the work has allowed me to be able to face some of those triggers and not feel like I'm going to just lose my goddamn mind.
Yeesh. Okay, so that's beautiful. That's actually a great segue into what we wanted to talk about today, which is that trauma itself does not give a shit about what's going on in your life. And when it shows up, it shows up. And so this is going to be more, and we told people this in the first episode, some episodes are going to be part of this story and some of the trauma that you've experienced. And those will be a little bit more intense episodes. And we'll give you a trigger warning on those, by the way, if you're listening. But then some of them are going to be more like this, where we actually talk about now what? Now, this happened to you. This crash happened to you. You lost your son. What now? How do you move on? How do you keep going? How do you take the next step in life? And how do you deal with the trauma showing up, sneaking around out of the bushes and just trying to sabotage you when you're just trying to go to Antigua, which is
right.
That's what you were trying. Right. We weren't supposed to record today. You're supposed to be out,
yep.
But here you are. You're coming back from the gym, and we're doing this recording. And by the way, shout out to Danielle.
Hey,
for introducing
Danielle.
us.
Yeah, Danielle's amazing. We both Jordan and I work with Danielle. She's our trainer, and yeah, you're getting me in all of my post-workout sweaty glory, and we're uncensored and we're raw. So why the hell not, right?
Love it.
No making things media. I spent too much time making myself up for the media. I would spend 2 hours just getting ready for interviews, and that is just ridiculous. So most of the time I'm ponytail and, in a t-shirt and my yogurt pants. I love that. Have you ever seen Noelle?
No.
This is just totally sidetracked. But I have to, because it just cracks me up every time. Every time we watch it. Anna Kendrick is in a movie called Noelle, and she's in the grocery store, and there's a lady, she's in the freezer because she's in Arizona and she's hot. That's interesting. Arizona. Hey, yeah, we'll get to that here in a second. But she's hot. So she's standing in the freezer, and a lady comes up, and Noelle's like, I love your pants. And the gal goes, they're thanks. They're my yoga pants. And she goes, your yogurt pants?
Perfect.
Listen, here's the thing, people. I have ADHD. I have some ADHD in me. So there will be times where I will just be like, stop and let's sidetrack for a second. And then we're going to get right back. We're going to get right back on track. But yes, shout out to Danielle, because she has been with us through a lot of the shit that we've been through, especially over the past year. And she introduced us, and she's amazing. So
yeah, Danielle's not a sponsor of the podcast, but she could be.
Danielle could be a sponsor of the podcast.
She does wonderful work. If you guys are in the Nashville area,
she kicks my ass. This morning, I'm like, hey, we're gonna tell everybody that Danielle actually believes in me more than she should, as she continues to up the weights that she's giving me, and I'm like, no.
But you always need someone who believes in you more than you do.
That's right. And she does.
Danielle.
She does in very many ways, actually. I love Danielle. So thank you, Danielle.
Yeah. On that. But that's part of it, right? That's part of regulating, that is exercise, and the right kind of exercise. You can't just be punching a wall just because it burns calories and it feels.
No, I mean, well, and that's what, to be fair, it's only been in about the past year that I've actually taken care of myself the right way. For me, I'm in my mid 40s. I'm perimenopausal. I used to, for years, even before Logan passed away, my job was so rough. And there was just so much shit going on that I would just put on my sneakers and start running. And I would run, and I'd go out every day, and I'd run miles and miles, and which is not good for your body. And then once we moved to Tennessee, and especially around the trial and sentencing, I literally would find every single hill in our neighborhood, and I would sprint up and then go back down and then sprint up and go back because I needed to get that energy out. And let me tell you, people, that's not the way to properly heal, because I had really bad back issues last year because I wasn't kind to my body. I thought I was being kind to myself and, working through all of the trauma, but I wasn't. I was hurting it. And I mean, I actually started with Danielle last July, and we only got, I think, about a month in, and then I had to quit because my back just completely gave out. And I worked with her in other ways until the beginning of the year. And then by doing other therapies and healing the right way, taking a break, breathing, stopping all of the activity, which I was using to distract myself, I was able to, pinpoint what was going on. I have an amazing gal who does dry needling. Thank you, Chrissy. There's a shout out to Chrissy too. But and along that path, she has helped me so much. And now I'm, 4 days a week, working up to 5. But it's also really good therapy for me. There have been moments where I've, if I have a traumatic dream and I get up and I'm dysregulated, I'll go in and I'll be like, Danielle, kick my ass today. Don't ask questions, just kick my ass. And of course, we usually end up talking about it because she gives me the space. She's a wonderful human, gives me the space. But I feel so much better getting up first thing in the morning and being able to go just kind of, expunge all of the negative energy if I've got it. And it's a wonderful thing. And that is healthy. Running up hills, sprinting up hills, not healthy. Every single day, not healthy.
Not as healthy. Well, no. And so let's dissect all of this. And some of this stuff we're going to go into like specifics in separate episodes. So this is more like the general overview. But when we think about what the topic for today was, which is trauma doesn't care about your vacation, right? Trauma doesn't care that you're at your kid's function or that, it's your anniversary or whatever. Yeah. What are some ways that that's shown up for you? And then let's talk about some of those. And then let's talk about how you decide how to treat that, how to cope with that, how to work with that.
So yeah, interestingly, I am supposed to be sitting on a beach in Antigua right now. Today is actually our 20th wedding anniversary. So yay to us, 20 years with lots of trauma and the loss of a child and a whole bunch of other bullshit. But, unfortunately we are not in Antigua. Obviously I'm sitting here in my office, and, Jordan is actually currently out in Arizona doing some intensive trauma work. We had, and this is me just speculating, but if I am to put the tools together and the knowledge together, I have a feeling that last November when Jordan started, so he'd been to Milestones in 2022. He was doing well. He was in his therapies and all the things. And we'll talk about Milestones definitely later, because
we'll explain what that is. That's a whole different
Milestones
episode.
is definitely a topic that everyone's going to hear about quite a bit. Because it both changed and saved our lives. But, he comes back from Milestones in the summer of 2022 and has done a tremendous amount of work and started to peel back some of the layers. And he was, moving forward. And it was the early last November, he started to show signs of kind of taking steps back. And it would just kind of gradually, where his old patterning would come out. And patterns that were the reason that he went to Milestones in 2022 in the first place. And by the way, a little bit of Cliff Notes, Milestones is a place for residential trauma. And we've both been. I've been twice. He's been the one time. But I start to gradually notice, things are a little off, and he's starting to lose his patience more. He's starting to become activated more. He's starting to not be able to tolerate things like he had been for the past couple of years. And I happened to be, I kept telling him as situations would come up, we're not going back. We're not going back to where we were before you went to Milestones in 2022, because things were rough. I mean, we were headed for divorce. In fact, I asked him to leave the house, and in March of 2022, and he would end up at Milestones in May of 2022.
Whoa.
But I'd asked him to leave because it just was too much. It was too toxic. All of the trauma was just eating at him, and he couldn't regulate. So every little thing, he was blowing up. And so, he knows, we've had these discussions many times, that him and I and our family were not going back to the way it was then. But I start to notice in November, just very gradually, things are kind of building and building and building. And we get into the first of the year, and they're still building. And I happened to be up in Indianapolis a few weeks ago helping my mom. She's actually moving to Tennessee. That's how great this place is, by the way. So I was up there, and I was supposed to stay until a certain day, and I ended up coming home early because there was a situation that happened at home, and I no longer felt like it was okay for me to be gone. So I came home, and we met with our wonderful trauma marriage counselor therapist that we kind of have together. He works with her, but then we meet together as well. And we'd already been talking about maybe him going and doing some work at a place out in Arizona, an intensive program out in Arizona. We started talking about that before spring break, actually. And we were like, yeah, Logan's birthday is in June, so we're going to go to New York City, and my mom's going to be moving down, and, all of this stuff's going on, so maybe we'll do it in July. Then I was like, nope, it is not. After that incident happened, I was like, we can't go to Antigua. You have to, go breathe. You just have to go breathe. And it wasn't, I need to put this out there because a lot of his trauma always results in, when I'm saying go breathe, take a break, his abandonment issues in his trauma, every time I say that, I'm not saying I'm divorcing you, but that's what he hears. I'm saying, go breathe. Go take a moment. I mean, I do that. I find things like going to Danielle, or going, I have special things that I do, to go take a breath. I mean, even just walking, Jordan likes to go take hikes. But when he starts to get into that mode, and I've been the same way, of where the body is so dysregulated, you can't get even motivated to do any of that. Any of the things that bring you joy become very, very hard. And so I told him, I was like, just go breathe. I got home, and that night he went and stayed at a hotel, and he was able to just be with himself and decompress. And in the process, he actually called the program in Arizona. And by the time we met up the next day with Jennifer, our counselor, he had already, called them, made plans to start. He's been in Arizona for a little over a week. He actually just started the program on Saturday. He could be there for a couple weeks, but he started the program the day we were supposed to leave for Antigua to celebrate today's 20th anniversary. But we knew it wasn't the right time. It was more important to us that he go to this program and do work and allow himself to process the trauma that was dysregulating his body, so that we can go to Antigua later. We can continue on with our marriage. Like, we each end up doing our own individual work outside of, doing couples work, which is also very important. But when you recognize that you're in a state of crisis, and crisis can show up all sorts of ways for anyone.
Anywhere.
His comes out through anger, and mine, actually, I shut down. I become dissociative, and I, go into very dark places. Or I have in the past, I should say. And that's just everybody's different. Our bodies react differently. I think a lot of our childhood traumas will play into how we react to those too.
Yeah.
But so we decided it was more important for him to go out to Arizona to do this work. And I've been very happy to get reports back from him. I mean, he's in it from like 7 a.m. I think last night he was in it until 7:30 or 8 p.m. I mean, nonstop during the day. So we're not having a lot of a chance to talk, but he's sending videos home to the girls and to us. And, we're talking sporadically here and there. And so far, I'm very, very hopeful from what I'm hearing from him. It sounds like the program is starting to allow him to put certain childhood traumas, the reason he is the way he is today, in his face. And the more you process that, the more your body begins to calm down and regulate.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
Yes. You know, one of the quotes that changed my life, somebody told me when I was 18, is like, the person you're going to be someday, you're becoming now.
Yeah.
So figure that out. Right. And so, but the problem is the person we are now, we were becoming at childhood. So you still have to address all of that and still.
Well, some people even say that it starts in the womb. Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't have any recollection of that for myself, but
and we can at some point bring a guest in, like an actual therapist or something like that, to kind of discuss this, which we will. There's we have plans for all sorts of that stuff, but there's so many lessons that I just took from that story and from that example. Do you mind if I share some of this stuff that I'm just like learning from you, just as you talk?
No, of course, please do.
First of all, there is. I don't know at what point you figured this out, or if you even notice that you do this, but there is some level of self-awareness, right? That you have to be able to recognize the patterns. And if you don't, you have to have a partner. In this case, it's your husband, but it could be a friend, it could be a sibling, it could be a parent that goes kind of like that Snickers commercial where you're like, hey, you're acting like Betty White.
That's right.
Don't be Betty White right now. You know, like, so you and Jordan, you know, he also, from what I understand, started to recognize that on himself, you know, and when he took that time in isolation, he goes, wait a minute, I'm doing this right now. So whether it's patterns or whether it's certain locations or places that you're at that you notice every time this is happening, I'm not okay. Like, this is a very lame example, but this is how, if my car is messy, I'm not okay. I figured this out when I was selling books door to door, but I've told my wife, like, hey, if you ever go into like, we always take the other car, but if you're ever in my car and you notice that it's a mess, like there's trash everywhere, which is rare for me. Usually I like to keep my car clean. I don't eat in the car. So if it's nasty, my wife will go, are you okay? And I'm like, oh, no, I'm stressed. Like, you know, but even that little bit of self-awareness goes such a long way, because then you start being able to recognize, I'm not myself right now. Or I mean, or at the very least, I'm the version of myself that I don't want to be. And to even stop and be able to see that alone is a challenge, I think, for people who've gone through trauma, because it just sneaks upon you like that. And also,
and that's why we're doing this, right? Because these things happen to people all the time. The body dysregulates for people who have had traumatic experiences or loss or grief, or, I mean, anything. Like I say, we're here. I'm here because I lost my son very violently in a distracted driving crash. But there are so many different levels of trauma. Like, I've been told numerous times, my CPTSD, complex PTSD, is so bad that it is relative to a war vet's. But I will sit here and tell you, I can't even imagine. I have a very dear friend who's finishing up in the military, and we've had many, many talks. And I don't know. I can't fathom what he has been through and what he has seen. And I've seen shit that is, I mean, horrifying, you know? And so I'm not here to say, well, you know, you had a miscarriage, so your trauma isn't as big as mine. Your loss isn't as big as mine. That is the one misconception, because people will say, well, my loss isn't as big as yours or isn't comparable. And I'm like, no, wait. You've suffered loss. You've suffered this experience. You know, this has been your experience. They may be different experiences from me to you, but I hear you, you know, and you're not alone. And there is no comparison between your situation and mine.
We've all been through the hardest thing that we've ever been through, right?
So far. Yeah.
So far. Yeah. I mean, and that's the crazy part, is it could be something worse, right? But there's people who might be listening right now that are like, wait a minute, that's right. You know, they're recognizing that right now, and it's just understanding. So from what I got, one is self-awareness, you know, or having someone who is aware for you, because you might not even have that self-awareness, but at least having someone with you that is like, wait, hey, you're doing the thing, right? And we need to talk about this. And then two, understanding that everybody manifests that in a different way, right? Like you said, you go isolated, where Jordan gets angry, right? And so understanding that pattern as well, that's kind of a branch of self-awareness, but it's almost separate, because it's like this other being that you're capable of being, that you're really not 99% of the time, and attacking that. So then you go and seek help. So there's counseling, there's exercise, there's these programs that are more intensive, and you have to, go be a resident in to participate and, unpack all of your stuff. When did you start after the crash? So this was in September 15, 2016. So, we're talking almost 10 years ago, right? So over the last 9 years, how did you come about realizing these things? How did you, because obviously a year after the crash, you weren't this self-aware, or were you? I guess I don't know. How did
no. I would honestly,
I'm
going to say that I've only been this self-aware probably in the past year.
Oh, wow.
But oh yeah, it's only been about in the past year. And that's not for the sake of me just rolling up into a ball and not trying. I have to put that out there because I have worked my ass off from the get-go. Jordan and I started in a grief group maybe a month or so after. I mean, I was still unable to walk very well. That's how soon it was after the crash. Because remember, I was in the hospital for 9 days. I was hooked up to a tube in the wall because, my ribs were broken. I had a punctured lung. I couldn't even move to go to the bathroom for the first probably week. People had to help me. So, and going home, I could, I slept in our recliner and couldn't move. I had people having to help me. And so when we first started that grief group, I was still unable to fully walk. So that's how soon we jumped in. And we started grief groups, when we lived in Tampa, we were into 3 or 4 different grief groups. We were given the resources to a trauma therapist. So we both started working in trauma therapy then. We were both working with the counselor that I had been working with before. And then we moved back to Indiana and we were able to find our grief therapist there. And, so we started working from the get-go and we haven't stopped. But I'm gonna throw the little Logan winks in, the little drops, the little nuggets that have been placed along our path that we have chosen to recognize. And I'm gonna repeat that. We have chosen to recognize and follow. We didn't ignore them. And as we started choosing those and following those, that's when things started to open up and paths began opening up and people and things came into our lives that have led us to where we are today. And this is a continual journey. I'm not sitting here today going, well, almost 9 years later, I'm cured. I don't have trauma anymore.
Yeah, there's no you almost at 10 and then all of a sudden magic. Nothing happened.
Well, listen,
Sketch.
Jordan, and this is why we say trauma doesn't give a shit about your vacations or your holidays or your birthdays. Jordan's out now, right, in Arizona because he recognized the need to go do the work. And we are missing out on our 20th anniversary. We are apart on our 20th. Yeah. Like we had this trip planned, I think 8 months ago, and we had been so excited to go. But that was more important. For me, I started to, so post-trial in 2023, we walked away from trial and sentencing. And when people say it doesn't change anything, we walked away with, I felt like this massive weight was on our shoulders and I went about my life and, we moved we ended up having to move again and, we were settling back in. And then all of a sudden around, I think it was Thanksgiving, something fell off. And I started to feel myself slip into like this state of fight or flight. And in my patterns, when these things happen, because I can recognize them, my patterns go from starting to feel a little bit more anxious. And then it's like doomsday is coming and it just grows and grows and grows until I'm no longer in control of my body or my brain. That's why I said I dissociate. This will be a topic that will absolutely be spoken about many, many times. And this is me being at some of my most vulnerable, but it made me suicidal. I've actually been in this state 3 times and been in a suicidal state 3 times, and which I now understand why, and we'll talk about that more in a different episode, which has helped set me on the right path to being able to be here today. But in November, early December, I recognized that I was starting to slip. And I was telling my therapist, I was telling Jordan, that I felt it something didn't feel right. I was concerned, and both of them were like, no, you're fine. You've been to Milestones. You're fine. You've got the tools. No, I didn't. That's actually very serendipitously when we met Jennifer, who we work with trauma-wise now, and who recommended the program that Jordan's in right now. And we started for couples therapy, but that session I was in such a state of panic and fight or flight. I was so dysregulated that it became about me. And then we decided to do an intensive. So I went and I stayed out of the house. I was at a resort actually here in Middle Tennessee, and thinking, all right, I'm going to relax. They've got a spa and I'm going to do this intensive. This is what I need to break out of it. And by the time we were done with the intensive, she goes, I hear you. You need to go back to Milestones. And I left for Milestones on December 18th. Full well knowing that a week later was Christmas, full well knowing that exactly a week after that was New Year's and my birthday, and I was going to miss. And we were supposed to leave that December for Mexico to bring in the New Year, celebrate the New Year in Mexico, which we've since done. We did that this past year, and it was the right time to do it. I don't believe it was the right time before. I needed to be able to go do the work that I needed to do. But, and so I gave up everything for sake of my own mental health, my own physical health, and went back for a second tour at Milestones. And I remember being there, and I felt so shameful because I had gone back. I'm like, I've already done this once. I'm not supposed to be here. And everybody's going, why would you say that? And I'm like, because I've done this once. I'm stronger than that, right? I'm not human.
It's supposed to be better.
I'm superhuman, which is what was built into me growing up, right? That I'm supposed to be superhuman. So I was ashamed, and I'm not ashamed, because had I not gone back as my intuition told me to go back, they would not have set me on a new path that I needed to start on in order to get where I am here today. So, that's where, the short story long is trauma doesn't give a shit, but it's also recognizing what you need and putting your life on hold in order to be able to do the work to continue living your life in a hopeful and joyful way, and walking alongside the shit that you're going to work on.
Yeah. And it makes sense that, I mean, like that, there's another example of where your self-awareness pushed through, even despite Jordan and your therapist going, you're fine. There still needs to be some, at the very basics, you have to know yourself and work on yourself enough to know yourself well enough to get to that point. And that can be in your control, despite how difficult it is. It's still up to you.
You asked about the self-awareness part. I was not, it is only because Jordan went to Milestones first. And just a sidebar here for a second, we talked about, the willingness to be able to go. Jordan fought it the first time. Jordan was like, I don't fucking need any of this. I don't need this help. I don't need to go.
It's kumbaya or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and that's what, you go and you're like, oh, it's this place to just rest and kind of chill out. Hell no, it's not. There's a reason it is residential. It's because you got shit that you need to process in order to go back into your, into the world, into life. And he fought and fought going there. And then he finally, he did. We supported him. He went. He came back. He encouraged me to go. I went. And I kind of fought it too. And he was calling me from Milestones going, I really encourage you to do this because you have all this trauma. And I'm like, I'm in therapy 3 times a week. I don't need to go do this. Then he comes home and I'm like, he's telling me, he's got like this vocabulary and this vernacular that is just so well beyond anything. And I'm going, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so I would end up going, but it was because of that opened the door for the willingness for both of us to say, or the self-awareness, I guess I should say too, for me to go in December of 2023, something's wrong, I got to go back. And for Jordan this time, there was no questioning it. There was no working around it. There was no trying to put it off. Man, when I came home that day from Indiana, and we said, this is what needs to happen, he was on the phone that afternoon. So that is a huge part, but that didn't come until the milestone. So we were working, right? We were working, but that self-awareness, we have these little breadcrumbs in our path that we chose to pay attention to that would lead us here and put this person in our lives who would suggest this and recommend this and put us in these places. So it's, we can sit here all day long and be like, okay, yeah, I got it. But it's the willingness to do something about it that's going to change your life.
Yeah. And that's tough to get into. I mean, we're probably going to talk about that. Could be a whole different episode about how to find that willingness, right? Because sometimes you just, there is the will is what's missing, and really that's all of it, right?
Listen, this shit is hard. Facing this, I still go to EMDR therapy and my body is activated the entire drive there. And I've, been doing EMDR with Tara since I was at Milestones. She was my adjunct therapist at Milestones, and I worked with her both times, and we did a lot of work together, and I still work with her now. And the last time I went in a couple weeks ago to do an EMDR session, and my whole body was activated before, and I hit on some topics I was not ready to hit on during that session, and I drove home, and it knocked me down for the day. But the thing is that I have another session with her next week, and I'm going because of the aha moments and the recognition and the processing that it did for me in that moment. So, hello, it's not enjoyable at all. However, it's not a but, it's an and. It's unenjoyable. And if you do the work, there is light on the other side. And I think that's where a lot of people get hung up and they don't want to do the therapy. They don't want to face it. They don't want to feel the anxiety. They don't want to feel the pain. Yeah. And to me, that is and then they end up coping in ways that they shouldn't. Yeah.
Because alcohol is easier to drink, or drugs are easier to abuse, or any sort of thing like that is people find it's easier, right? And that's not to shame anybody who
no.
It's just it's understandable, right? It's understandable because we have to cope with what we cope with, and we're hoping that people choose to do the hard path, which is the scary path, which is facing that anxiety and facing that fear and facing that stuff. But it takes that will. And it's hard. Finding the will to do anything is hard.
Jordan
going
and I
to
have
the gym or going to therapy. I know it's tough. Yeah. It's tough.
Instead of alternatives. Excuse me. Jordan and I have a lot of friends, who have lost their way in addiction. In fact, I lost a friend of mine last October to addiction. And the trauma for that young man was insurmountable. As is for a lot of people, it doesn't matter how big the trauma is. It could just be little T traumas, which are little instances over time building up. It really could be anything, but you escape because you don't want to feel it. And, this young man in particular, I knew his true self. He was an amazing human when he was not trying to hide the pain through all of that. And that's what I want to tell people is that, there is no shame around that. Sometimes it's just too big to deal with. However, there are alternatives as well, and that is my belief. That is for sure my belief. But again, it's a lot of work, and it's facing things, you know, we as humans, we don't like pain. It's just,
we're
physical,
wired
emotional.
to not want pain, right?
Exactly.
We're supposed to not, like, if your hand is on the burner, you're supposed to take your hand off. That's literally the whole way that we're designed.
Mila this morning gets out of bed, and her leg, she must have slept wrong on her leg. And, you know, she's crying about it. And I encouraged her to cross that leg over the other and do, you know, like a sit four, you know, where your leg's in a four shape and you sit down into it. And I said, you know, you just need to stretch it. And she's like, I can't, it hurts. And, you know, and I even, listen to this. I even asked her if she wanted ibuprofen to try and help. And she said, no, Mom. This is a 5.5-year-old, by the way. She goes, no, Mom, I want to see if it'll go away on its own before I take any of that. And I'm like, holy shit, we are doing something right. Oh my God, we are doing something right, you know. But she ends up, I'm watching her as the morning progresses before she gets on the bus, and she's standing there and she's very gradually crossing that leg over and stretching it out. It hurt. But this 5.5-year-old, who's like so much wiser than any adult I know, right, is doing this to stretch out her leg. And by the time we left for the bus, it was all fine. And so she faced that pain instead of walking around crying about it. And I'm like, good for you. I'm like, I told her, I was like, kid, you know, nobody likes pain. And I'm like, but here's the thing. It's not going to last forever if you choose to help it. And she goes, I hope it doesn't last forever. And I'm like, Mila, it won't last forever. I mean, this is a 5.5-year-old, right?
How
Who
cool.
the hell is this little old soul who is wise, so wise beyond her years, for sure.
Just impressive. Just an impressive little girl.
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, she's our little, I mean, she's named Mila because she is our little miracle baby, even though, again, Jordan likes to talk about how he'll be almost 60 by the time she graduates high school. And I'm like, you know what? We chose to do this. So, you know.
6th floor is a great floor. 60 is great.
My God. Remind me of that. The older I get.
I love it. So I guess last question for you, and then we can wrap up, is if there might be people out there thinking, and again, this is probably going to be a much longer episode, but maybe just some initial thoughts on this, as far as like someone might be listening to this, you know, Brooke, this is great, but I can't afford to go to Milestones. I can't afford therapy. I can't afford to do this. Are there any alternatives or any other things that you might recommend to someone who is in that boat, who doesn't have, I haven't had the breadcrumbs. I haven't paid attention to them. What do I do? We'll do a whole episode about this later, as far as like the American healthcare system and how it helps people or doesn't help people or whatever, but we'll get to that. But just in general, a quick word of advice for someone who might be in that situation.
I think that is one of the most passionate things that I carry with me, is how to create resourcing for people who have gone through this. I mean, it shouldn't be, you know, these therapies should not just be for the privileged. And I could get on my soapbox and talk about that all day, because I see a lot of people who suffer from this and have no ability to do the things that they need to do. What I will say, and part of the reason that this podcast and this venture is so important to me, is because people are not alone in their journeys, right? I am looking to build a community, a place where people who are suffering can come together and recognize that they are not alone. I am not a therapist. I thought about actually going back to school after I left Milestones to be one, but listen, I'm too old for that type of endeavor at this point in my life. But I talk to people all the time. I share my story with people, and it is through these experiences of sharing what we've been through, sharing my journey. I mean, I'm an open book, and I'm not afraid to talk about the hard things. I am not afraid to tell you that, yes, I've tried to take my life more than once, and it wasn't my fault, right? I know that now. It wasn't my fault. And I always wondered why I was in that space because, I was a tenured college professor, right? I rebuilt a program, a graphic design program, and those people don't, those things don't affect that kind of person. So what's going on with me? And there are definitely people out there right now listening who can't afford that crisis management help. So my goal is to say, listen, you are not alone and there are resources. But first and foremost, to build a community where people are talking about this to help maybe someday create a larger platform to advocate for these people, to have resources in order to go to milestones or go to residential trauma or to go out and do a trauma intensive or to get the help that they need. Listen, I went and did what Milestone sent me to the last time was an OCD program, because what I had learned was that, so genetically, my family, both sides of my family suffer from OCD, and I've had it for a long time, but in a manageable way. But what I learned was that the trauma was so intense that it actually triggered the OCD into a very unhealthy state. And that would be what would cause my suicidality. That would cause my crisis modes, going into the abyss, going into this dissociative. And what the hell, if people were talking about this, maybe none of that would have happened and I might not have lost Logan. We'll talk about all that later too.
Yeah,
but I might not have lost Logan.
Episode.
And that is a whole episode.
That might be two episodes.
People, yeah. Oh, well, and it'll probably be something that we talk about a lot because I'm very passionate about this trauma and grief and loss and mental health, support, and why our society wants to pretend like it's all unicorns and butterflies. I'm here to say it's not. And, there are more people out there who are suffering than, we get on. So I'm going to be the first to tell you, I loathe social media because it's not real. It is just not real. What is actually going on behind those scenes? What are the actual stories from people who are posting about how great their lives are, and it's those people I want to give a hug and be like, this isn't, you're hiding, but how many of those can afford some sort of, care? So honestly, my end game goal is going to be to help provide these resources to people. I know it's a hefty goal, but, my ketamine doctor, Dr. Rome, is very passionate about working to get insurance companies to cover therapeutic ketamine, which I fully support. I'm hoping that she'll come join us at some point. So yes, I need ketamine. That's another thing that I will be completely vulnerable and transparent about.
And that's another topic that we're also going to discuss.
But again, I want to say it is therapeutic ketamine.
Yeah.
I always have to make that a disclaimer. It is in a controlled setting with doctors and people who are watching me at all times. And I don't get it sent to my home. I go to a clinic. And it's well controlled, but it has changed. That has changed my life too, between that and the therapies that I'm doing. Yeah. And in fact, they started me there the time, or just the recent time I was at Milestones. They thought I was a good candidate, and they were absolutely right. But she fights for insurance companies to cover therapeutic ketamine because that stuff's not cheap. And, people are suffering, and it shouldn't just be for people who can write the check or swipe the credit card, who deserve that care.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox on that because I could talk all day long. But anyway, bottom line.
Again, these are all this whole episode is kind of like a 30,000 foot view of the aftermath of the crash and trauma and how it shows up. But it's really informative. It's helpful. But
0.00000 per 1% of
for the future, there's just topics that came out of this that we could do a whole episode on, which we already have planned, right? Marriage and dealing with trauma and how it can affect your marriage and that parenting after said trauma, right? How Mila never met Logan, but then she'll have to learn about what happened and, coping with that. But then
Mallory too.
Also, on the
our
other hand, she
13-year-old.
knew him. And so now how do you help her cope with her trauma? Because she lost a brother, so that's two different. I mean, you could do a whole episode on either of those perspectives.
Yep.
Self-awareness therapy, medical treatments, expensiveness, or the costly part of that. Really, really good stuff, I think, in this one. And it's laced with a lot of really deeper conversations that we are having. I mean, we have a spreadsheet of all the topics, and each one of those things we touched on, we already were like, oh yeah, we could talk for an hour about that. No
for
doubt.
Sure. It's an ongoing process. The conversation will never end.
Yeah.
It just won't.
Yeah. And I think that's why, Danielle and some of your launch team were like, you need to talk about this on a podcast, because a lot of people are gonna be inspired. And again, and let me say this on your behalf. You don't need me to, but let me just say this on your behalf. This podcast is not to be like, oh, look how hard my life is at all. No. Never did I get that. There might be people listening who are like, yeah, well, I'm going through this too. Yeah, that's the point. The point is, we're all going through some shit, man. Right. Mm-hmm. And we've all gone through some shit. And if you haven't, someday you might. Either way. I
often say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
Something is going to touch your life that is going to affect you in ways that you are currently not prepared for.
Yeah.
And that's...
And even if you're prepared for it, like, even if you're like, if you had been a therapist who knows about trauma and you were in a car crash, it's like, it's not like it skips you because you're enlightened or something. It doesn't work like that.
It doesn't. Yeah. Again, it doesn't matter who you are. It's,
trauma doesn't give a shit about your vacation or if you know or do not know about how to deal with it. It just hits you, and it could be for any reason, anytime. And so that's the bad news, right? That's the bad news. The good news is there are people, there are support systems, there are ways to deal with it. It's not meant to derail you. I mean, it's going to. It's not meant to. It's meant to just help you grow and learn.
Yep.
And change.
And to know that there is, I am thriving in my life. We finally found the home that we've been looking for probably 20 years. One that actually felt like home. So I love it. And I just had a large garden installed in my backyard, and I've got all sorts of plants that need to go in the landscape.
You got some businesses
and I grow.
going.
Yeah, I do. I got some businesses going. I mean, I got all sorts of things moving, and I wake up willingly around 5:30 a.m. and get up and start doing my stuff. And I love it. It's my favorite time of the day. That's so early, but
it's all about perspective. And we're hoping that through this podcast, people listening can change their perspective to more of the perspective that you have, which is, or at least to understand your perspective, which is, hey, shit happened.
Yep.
It's okay. It's not okay that it happened to you. That sucks, but it's okay because it's going to be okay. It can
be okay.
Yeah.
It can be okay. I mean, that's the thing is I don't want to make it sound like, things are just going to magically clear up.
No. Yeah. No.
When you experience something, because you have to actually be willing to face what's going on. But it is in that work that creates the freedom from the bullshit. You will always have that with you, but it doesn't have to have power over or define you.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Mm-hmm. That right there is the way to close this one out.
Yeah.
And stay tuned for more. We have a couple of Q&A episodes that we have lined up coming up. If you're listening to this on launch day, which is June 2nd, which is Logan's birthday.
Happy birthday 18.
Logan. Mm-hmm. Then please leave us a review and give us a follow. If you enjoy this and want to learn a little bit more about us, maybe have some questions, there is an email that we attach in each of the descriptions. It's hello@traumauncensored.com, and you can reach out, send either feedback, questions, and we will have episodes where we pull from those and answer and give some advice, some general advice for your situation. Thank you so much, Brooke, for sharing some stuff today.
Thank you.
That was great. That was awesome. All right. My name's Andres Gamboa. We've been on with Brooke Scherer. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys. Bye. See you later.